Jesus Christ, according to Mark. Jesus set out and went away to the region of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know he was there. Yet he could not escape notice. But a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit immediately heard about him, and she came and bowed down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile of Syrophoenician origin. She begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. He said to her, "Let the children be fed first, for it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Sir, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he said to her, "For saying that, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." So she went home and found the child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went by way of Sidon toward the Sea of Galilee and the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. He took him aside in private, away from the crowd, and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. And then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." And immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And then Jesus ordered them to tell no one. But the more he ordered them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. They were astounded beyond measure, saying, "He has done everything well. He even makes the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." The Gospel of the Lord. Please be seated. We are a people who like our butts, don't we? Every day we use our butts to identify and separate people. For example, we like to say, "John Doe is a really nice guy, but man, he talks too much." Or Jane Doe is a hard worker, but whew, she is socially awkward. Frequently we use these butts to diminish people's values to ourselves. John is smart, but he's a man, so he can't relate to my problems. Jane is friendly, but she's a woman, so she'll never understand me. Whatever examples we can think of here, I'm sure we have all used those buts at some point in our daily lives. It's only human. It's almost expected of us. However, Jesus, through the Gospels, frequently seeks to push us to elevate ourselves above our basic nature and human inclination to use those buts. In our identity as followers of Christ, being called to see the face of God equally in others and to make our world a better place, we are asked to open our lives and our hearts by replacing our dependence on those buts with the inclusive dependence of the ands. John is nice, and he talks a lot. Jane is a hard worker, and she is socially awkward. This morning's Gospels lesson is about helping us to see the ands in our understanding of Jesus and in our relationship to prayer. For starters, we have two very contrasting healing stories this morning. In the first, the Syrophoenician woman has her daughter healed by Jesus from a demon effortlessly and from a distance. In the second, the deaf man with a speech impediment requires a more direct approach with physical contact and spoken words. Both lessons speak to an important truth, that God can bring healing in a variety of ways. Or to think in modern terms, God can heal indirectly through the use of a doctor, perhaps, and in more direct ways, like the prayers of a priest or friends or family. Yet we're also confronted with the betrayal of Jesus that many, myself included, shy away from. We don't like to hear him, the Jesus the kind, loving Jesus, speaking unkindly to anyone, let alone calling a woman a dog. We may say things like, sure, he's human, but he's Jesus. He's perfect. He wouldn't talk to anyone like that, would he? Now, our text makes it clear that Jesus wants to be left alone. Now, maybe as a man, his spiritual well is dry, and it needs to be replenished before he continues on with his mission. After all, he's postponed his retreat with his disciples, and he shows compassion to the crowds instead. And he goes on to feed the multitudes, heal the sick, and free those possessed by demons. Perhaps Jesus, the man, is spiritually, physically, and emotionally worn out. Maybe he's just plain exhausted and looking forward to a little bit of a vacation. But that was not to be. It was not written. The Syrophoenician woman found him, and this unnamed woman who comes to Jesus is obviously exhausted herself. Her daughter is demon-possessed, and we have heard from multiple other Gospels and multiple other passages that the possessed lash out. They experience convulsions, and they tend to harm themselves as well as others, particularly those closest to them. This mother is exhausted, rightfully, and she wants her child to be well, because she needs a break. And of course, we are surprised that instead of showing this woman compassion, Jesus speaks down to her, condescendingly. Perhaps our discomfort here is because we forget the humanity of Jesus when we assume the Christ in the divinity. We believe and profess that Jesus is fully human and fully divine. And here we encounter Jesus in his full humanity, no doubt about it. Why else would he be so rude and dismissive? Why else would he be so much like us? Why would he respond to the Gentile woman's plea with, "Let the children be fed first, for it's not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs"? Don't forget here that the children are the chosen ones, or the Jews. And despite this divine nature of Jesus, it is clearly his human nature we see emerging here. And yet, it is the Syrophoenician who gets the better of this exchange. Because the woman doesn't question Jesus. She accepts the analogy and its implication, but she points out that when the children are fed, the dogs also get some small reward from or benefit that falls from the table. In this moment, the Jesus of Mark's gospel has a learning moment. Suddenly, Jesus, the man, sees that an essential part of his mission must extend to all those in need. It's not just a division between the Jews and the Gentiles. It is an understanding that his human ministry is equally for all men and all women. We then see Jesus reaching across prejudices and healing the daughter. Moving forward, we see this become a normal, almost typical pattern of Jesus. Because in the very next part of the gospel, we learn Jesus went to Galilee, the place where his ministry started. And at Galilee, Jesus is confronted with an unfortunate man who can't hear and has a speech impediment. He's handicapped. He's at a disadvantage in his community. Because illness at that time and deformity were once believed to be caused by moral issues, moral shortcomings. And his neighbors assumed, because he was suffering, that he had committed a sin. And for the villagers, this man was a part of their community, but he was diseased, so they cast him out. Jesus again reaches across the gap, opens the man's ears and mouth, and restores him to wholeness. Make no mistake about it, this is the basis of the good news that we see throughout all of Mark, that Jesus restores people to community. Mark shows us Jesus is changing religious rules to include more people, opening communication where there was deafness and denial before, and creating new possibilities for new relationships. I wonder, where would we see this story in the world around us? Certainly in hospitals, we're advancing the ways to help people hear and improving our technologies in vast ways to help people to speak, helping the deaf and the mute in various ways to be restored to the community. An example I often think of is in the old sitcom The West Wing. My wife and I are a huge fan of this show, so I watch it frequently, and I'm always amazed in that a deaf woman is played by the accomplished actress Marlee Matlin, who is deaf in real life. She plays an employee at the White House, a highly capable and functioning at the top of our society. But her deafness is not an impediment, and she asks for no special treatment, and she exemplifies the distinction that is often made between cured and healed. She is still deaf, but her place in society is healed because she is not an outcast. Considering the difference between cured and healed, we can also see there is another way to think about deafness. I think we often tune each other out. Spouses turn a deaf ear to their parents or to their partners. Children certainly tune out their parents. And sometimes communities of people will not hear the plea for help from their neighbors or those around them. Deafness and denial have played a big part in my own life for sure. Sometimes it has required a terrible event to open my eyes and my ears and cause me to speak. And yet I have learned that I can prayerfully open myself to the ways I might be deaf when I feel a kind of agitation or anger growing inside of me. I know it is an invitation to stop, to consider, and to pray to God for help, to accept the ands He is putting in front of me. An even greater step is to make my needs known to friends or family and trust them when they say, I need help. In all of this, they have been like Jesus in their ministries to me, praying that I might be healed, that my ears might be opened to what's going on around me, and that I might have the strength to open my mouth. Who are the people around you at home, or at work, or in your neighborhood, or in your school? Who is it that you hear? Are there friends in your life trying to get you to listen to something you don't want to hear? Do they say it over and over? Do you pray for Jesus to remove those buts you are using to dismiss their pleas to listen? Are you praying to open your ears, clear your mouth, and restore you to community where there are ever-expanding circles of friends and no outcasts? Being a good Christian, even a good Episcopalian, goes way beyond just being nice. It means much more than coming to the church building to hear or get fed. We hear God's word and are fed in the sacraments, not to be nice. We receive these gifts in order that we may change and become better individually and collectively, so that we may preview the sort of world God will eventually recreate. The measure of that change may be seen in our own church community, or nationally, or locally. How do we show a right image to the outside world, particularly to those in need, if we get hung up in always wanting things our own way? Or we are always condemning those who get in the way of what we want? If we do that, the only thing the outside world will see is a church that acts like a political social club and is thoroughly separated from the world, no matter how much we say we are in the world. Oh, sure, they say they are a church, but they don't accept anyone or even listen to anyone who doesn't agree with them. That is not the direction nor the message of Christ. Yes, indeed, God heals us in a variety of ways. Doctors and hospitals can all be part of answered prayer. But it's also equally important to realize that just because not everyone gets healed, it is no reason to assume that no one gets healed. There is more than one way to pray, and there are more than one answers to our prayers. For God has done so much in our life that we have not even begun to understand his full implications. So we shouldn't focus on whose praying approach is the best. We need to focus on the prayer itself and our relationship with God. For God uses all prayer in all different ways and for different purposes. With God, the answers to our prayers are seldomly found with the buts we use in our lives. However, they are frequently, if not always, delivered with the ands we choose to use and accept.